who is just like purely objectively neurochemically the happiest person on earth?
Yes.
Like, I'm so fascinated by that question. Like, he's probably not,
Yes.
It's almost certainly like no world leader, no Hollywood actor, like nobody that people like admire or follow or respect. It's probably like a plumber in like Minnesota.
Eric Jorgenson, what an absolute honor with a new book out. I'm so excited and honored for you to be here because you're one of the earliest guests of this podcast. You came on this show before there was a single episode out. And now you're here after 400 something episodes, but also you've made incredible strides in your career in that time as well. And I'm so honored and humbled for you to be here.
Thanks for having me back. It feels familiar, feels like home. And I didn't realize you had no episodes out, but it did feel like we were just a couple rugrats, just like hanging out, recording a podcast last time. You've come hundreds of episodes since then. It's cool. It's cool to see how fast things grow when like people really hit their stride.
Yeah, it really is. And one thing that you've done so well is you've basically cultivated the tastes of the most interesting people in the world. And then you've literally asked yourself, how can I live in their shoes? Why have you done that?
I think it's an incredible way to learn. That's how this started, is just, I learned so much from Naval, and I thought he was sharing such incredible, timeless, useful wisdom, and I wanted it to be in a format that was accessible to the maximum number of people. And I was very happy to just like swim around in his work and learn as much as I could and continue to absorb from him. And that sort of simple instinct to be like, I'll learn something and I'll produce something useful for like some of my people along the way. And I'm blown away by like where that has ended up, right? Like 6 years later.
Wow. That was 6 years ago that you had the initial idea. And the Naval's book has sold hundreds of thousands of copies. Is that correct?
I think we're over 1 million by now.
Over 1 million copies.
Yeah.
That's pretty remarkable.
And that's just sold. I mean, we give away the digital versions for free. I mean, and that's like 5 to 1 maybe. That might be another couple million at least.
Wow. I mean, how does that feel that millions of people have read your compilations?
I mean, it feels awesome. It is very abstract. Like a million books that's a big number, and that's like a huge milestone, and like not many books do that. And I'm really like, I'm amazed by that, but it's so much more difficult to wrap your head around than just like getting DMs from people who say incredible things about their unique story and what happened, or how often they reread it, or how it changed their life, or that they gifted it to their little brother who was struggling with figuring life out or something like that. So the anecdotes like hit much harder than the numbers to me. But when you pair the two, you're kind of like, man, this is like, it's incredible the reach, that a product like that can have. It's incredible. It is so far past my wildest expectations or even like dreams for it before we launched it, honestly.
And when you have something as much of a success as the Almanac of Naval Ravikant was, how do you then think about the next thing you do? I often think about James Clear with Atomic Habits. He hasn't put out another book, and I wonder if part of that is because when you have a bestseller as the first thing that you ever do, very few people can even understand what that's like to have a bestseller in the first place, to that level and that extreme. But now you have to write another one? Or what is that thing? How do you think about that for the next thing that you put out?
Well, James is a bestseller among bestsellers, right? Like he's a god among kings. Like he is, I think 4 years like running on the bestseller list, like maybe just on the top of it. He's close to, I think he's around 10 million copies. Like he's insane. And it also worth knowing, like it took him 10 years to write that book, right? Like he's just on a different pace. Me and Morgan Housel like have come out. We're on like the same cycle for whatever reason. Like we both had books coming out in 2020. We both have books coming out this year. And James is just like shaking his head at us, but also he sells like an order of magnitude more. So it is crazy to see the different games. I mean, there's a lot that changed after that first book, but certainly the feedback I got on the book was great. And then there was a lot of it that was actually feedback on the format. And to me, that is really like, to your question of like, what do you do next? I was like, oh, this format works again, for sure. Like there's a lot of people with incredible amounts of wisdom that are just dispersed or in these like inaccessible, ephemeral platforms. And that's been a lot of my career, a lot of my motivation is like, I think there's incredible value to be gained by just transforming the medium and just curating and just like, you know, we chase creation, but curation is just as important, maybe more important in this kind of like insane explosion of the volume of content in the world. And so it is clear to me that the world just like really appreciated the work that went into it. And I was like, man, there's a lot of other ideas that I think are really important to the world that I can package, that I can contribute. I know a little bit better how to do this the second time around. So there were some things that came a little more naturally. And I had so much inspiration and so much encouragement from people who loved the first one and so many opportunities to continue. So it felt very natural to like, yeah, of course I'm doing another one. And I don't know if it'll be bigger or less big or have a different kind of impact. And it doesn't really matter. Like the nature of the Balaji book is probably that it won't reach as many people, but it may have a much bigger impact on the number of people that it reaches. And I'm totally okay with that.
One thing I picked up from reading it is maybe less people will read it in the next 3 years, but he strikes me as like a Steve Jobs type character where maybe in 20, he'll be the most famous person in the world.
Yeah, that's possible. Like he's a high variance, extreme outlier for sure. It's a very, the Mark Andreessen says of him, which I think is really helpful context to go into it with, like when Balaji is wrong, it's because he over extrapolates, not under extrapolates. Right? He takes an idea to 11 when actually in reality, maybe it stops at a 6 or 7, but most people can't think past a 2 or 3. So if you spend some time in this dude's brain who can take stuff to 11, and sometimes he's right, but you'll learn to see around a few more corners, and that's good for all of us, I think.
Honestly, Balaji is one of the few people twice who really scared me.
Yeah.
Like when I was reading his tweets in February 2020, I was convinced the world was going to end. And then more recently, when he made this bet about Bitcoin, I was also convinced that our entire world, the way I understood it, was going to get upended. And I had to remove myself from the Balaji train of like, I can't be consuming his information because even if it's correct, it is making me feel worse. Was that thought ever go through your mind? Did that thought ever go through your mind?
Some form of it, yeah. Like it is definitely. I've had those moments too, but both of them, right? I was like, oh shit, like, is this it, right? And it's a good example of that. Like, go to 11. Like, is he wrong? Like, we don't know. He was right about a lot of what happened in COVID. A lot of it. Nobody was right about all of it, but he was very early and very right about a very good majority of things. And I think probably the same may turn out to be true with this economic. I have no like deep expertise in macroeconomics. Like that's voodoo to me. I'm not evaluating the claims. The things that he was probably wrong on, or we already know he's wrong on, is timeline, not outcome. And it's a little like Elon says, he's like, I'm over optimistic on timelines, but I always deliver. And like, that's what you see in a lot of these sort of futurists is like, they make an insane prediction that nobody else is even talking about. Like it's not even on the map. And they say maybe in 12 months X, or maybe in 24 months Y. And then maybe both X and Y happen in 36 months, but everybody spent a year or two saying like, oh, they're wrong. Like, And it's like, whoa. You weren't even thinking about X. We were just off by 12 months on when the outcome arrived. But the credit should go to the person for bringing it up in the first place. And we should be like, oh, good. Like, at least we saw it coming. Like, did you cry wolf? Like, was the wolf a little slower than you thought? Or should we be grateful that, like, we closed the gate before the wolf got here? So it's a very, like, it's interesting to see everybody's responses to things. You know, it's a little bit of a Rorschach test of people who are like, oh, interesting idea, or you're wrong, or that's not true, or whatever, right? Like, everybody's going to go express an opinion and figure out the best way to chart their path forward. And yeah, Balaji can stress you out sometimes, for sure. He is not afraid to, like, speak his truth, and sometimes it scares the shit out of people. And he doesn't, you know, doesn't soften it, doesn't sell you on it. Just is like, hey, I think some really bad shit's about to happen. But also, you know, and he gets less he gets less headlines for this, but he also says a bunch of good shit's going to happen, and that's very important too. Just not really the way his, like, not the things he's most known for. I think, unfortunately, which is why in this book I really focused on a lot of that, you know, the positivity, the foundation, the underpinnings of, like, why he's doing the things that he's doing over the long arc of his career. Yeah.
And what was so striking to me about, just from reading his take on on the beginning section, was like, oh wow, like, this guy got bullied by people on the East Coast. And now I don't know if what he's doing now is a result of the bullying that he had in high school or middle school or when he came to America, because he's putting down this very same people who were once his bullies. Did you see that correlation as well?
Yeah, I understood. Once I heard some of those stories of, like, those formative stories, I was like, oh, like, so much more of his personality and his approach to his work makes sense, right? You see that pattern, like, playing out as an adult, and, you know, it's a really interesting thing to see. I knew in the archetypes, right? But that story is really when it all clicks together. It's right at the beginning of the book, but, you know, people compare and contrast Naval and Balaji. It's like, the archetypes are very different. Like, Naval's a monk and Balaji's a warrior, and, like, he, you know, Balaji builds, but he is not afraid to pick up that sword and shield and, like, stand toe to toe with absolutely anybody. And that's where you see, you know, his compulsion towards truth, his desire to like, be correct or to drill down and find what is correct in a public discourse. Not afraid to surface the scary, bad, like, negative contrarian ideas, not afraid to go toe to toe with incredibly powerful institutions, incredibly, like, people who you would think could just bury him. And he will speak truth to power, like, and has done it over and over and over again. It's fascinating. And you see that he's been doing that, you know, since he was in middle school, right? Like, being the like, solo person standing against, you know, the only brown kid in a high school of white kids with mean bullies and parents and administrators who defended them and, like, victimized and, you know, perpetuated the situation he was in. And it's not hard, you know, it's not a stretch to see, you know, why he's willing to now stand up to the New York Times when they are, like, publishing misinformation about him or the causes that he cares about or the truth itself, right? You know, I salute his bravery. Like, that is a very tough, that is a tough road. And he's done a lot of courageous things.
What did you change about your behavior after writing the book?
The thing that I changed very quickly, I think is the most important idea of the book, and this happened really as I was writing it, is just a deep appreciation and respect for the moral importance of technology. Like, I'm not particularly, like, politically extreme about anything, but this, like, almost radicalized me as being, like, pro technology. And now the things like the best place we see it playing out is in self-driving cars right now. Like, 10 years ago, when the idea of self-driving cars came about and we were like, oh my God, someday we can have self-driving cars. This is so great. Millions of people die senselessly every year in car accidents. It's tragic. It's horrific. It's a leading cause of death. Finally, an end to this. How soon can we have them? And now, 10 years later, we have them. We have well-functioning self-driving cars that are cost accessible, and we have nothing but negative headlines about them. Like the media, the press, they're getting like sabotaged and graffitied and like damaged and scraped up, and people are protesting them in San Francisco. And it's fucking insane. Like that, like the moral good that technology has created that for some insane reason, some group of people is now fighting. If you look at that, like if you're playing God in The Sims and you're watching humanity like try to evolve, and you're looking at these people, you know, smashing the windows of self-driving cars, you're just like, why are these people punching themselves in the face? Like you have all this beautiful solution that you just earned. Like you're stepping on your own toes. Like, why are you doing this to yourselves? And that's a clear example, but there's so many of them, right? There's so many areas where either due to regulatory capture or an overzealous sort of, bureaucracy of some sort, just poor investment, poor alignment, poor incentives. Like we are just not, as a society, like placing emphasis on the building and perpetuating and distribution of new technologies, which is actually the foundation of what creates abundance for us. Like the reason we live in comfort and feel fed and have a roof over our heads and air conditioning and heat and shoes is all this incredible like sense of cooperation and technology and knowledge that is compounded, and we're prioritizing a bunch of other things ahead of it now, or allowing it to get pushed down in ways that are going to be disastrous for society if we don't figure out how to like put some respect back in that and appreciate it and work on it and vote for people that appreciate it and work on it. And I think Balaji spends more time like ringing the alarm bell than shining a bright light on the future, which is like my preferred approach. I want to be like, let's see how good the future could be, right? I know you just went through this. Like you redesigned your podcast logo to go from black and white to like, let's look at a beautiful brand new dawn, right? Like that is how I want to spend my life. It's so hopeful. It's so optimistic. Like those are the people I want to hang out with. That's the headspace I want to occupy. Those are the stories I want to tell. And I hope that comes through. I hope that this brings more people kind of, just aims their sunflowers toward the sun and like shows them a little more about what's possible and what's holding us back and how to like clip those ties where we can.
Yeah, it was remarkable to me when I first heard Balaji's perspective that the way even movies paint technology in the United States is evil and it's going to take us over. And ever since watching Black Mirror in a college class, I was like, this doesn't resonate with me. And I didn't have the words to understand why, but it was because it was painting a dystopian future that I didn't believe was going to happen or I agreed with. And why would I subject my consciousness to that, right? Similar to a horror movie. It's like, there's no reason for me to do that. But it's like, what if instead we created movies and we created pieces of works and art that showed technology as a force for good, because it has been.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm hoping we see a lot more of that. I think like Jim O'Shaughnessy at O'Shaughnessy Ventures is like doing some of this. He's investing in like exciting utopian books and movies and positive stories. And I think there's a whole sort of effective accelerationist movement where people who are getting incredibly optimistic about, scientific advancements and abundant energy and things like that. This feels like this is a snowball that's gaining momentum as an ideology and a way of life and a way of thinking. And I hope that this book finds its place kind of among that canon and helps bring more people into that fold and like just have a fundamental source of optimism, right? And appreciation for how a roadmap, for how we can make the future better than the present and much better than the past. We can't take for granted that the advancements are going to continue to come. Like all along the way, they have been earned, not given. And, entropy is only going to try to hold us back every chance it gets. And if we keep punching ourselves in the face, we're going to keep doing damage. Like, let's learn to stop.
What have you done to make yourself more optimistic?
I think people selection is the first thing. I think there's, this is almost a Naval book thing, right? It's just like training the voice in your head to appreciate first. It changed, like, this all is another answer to the question of like what changed in writing this book. I came out of the Naval book and started a small venture fund, just kind of seeing like how it changed his career, the capital leverage inherent in it, and valuing, the investments that I've made so far and the friends I had that are starting companies and supporting them. And then I started working on the anthology of biology, and I read Where's My Flying Car? And both of those were like huge, in the media side, like huge inspirations for me to continue to seek, like, there's something about founders and technologists that is inherently optimistic. And I now try to invest in and hang out with the people that are the most extreme optimists. And it's usually the people that are like working on the most crazy technology that they can think of, right? Because those are like by nature the people who are like, yeah, I think I can pull this off. Like, yeah, it's insanely difficult. It'll take 20 years, but like, I think it's worth it. Like, let's do it. And that's, like, those people are inherently optimistic and exciting, and they have a pretty high fidelity view of a beautiful future that they're not just, blowing smoke about. Like, they're working on making it happen. And so when you meet these like practical optimists who are like, I believe the world is great and can get better, and I'm working on making it better at the same time, like, that's the headspace I want to live in. Those are the people I want to be with. That's the media I want to consume, to your point, right? Like, like Interstellar, these are both recommendations from Balaji, but like Interstellar and Limitless are both kind of like technologically progressive, like slightly sci-fi things, not dystopian versions. And I think like some of the Studio Ghibli movies are like that. Like, there's a growing kind of like solar punk canon that is like a little more optimistic, but filtering for that stuff. And yeah, to your point, like, yeah, try to avoid Black Mirror, or people that think like it. And you can hear the lamentations of like, oh, technology's like only done bad for us, or this problem was caused by technology. It's like, yeah, how many problems did that technology solve, though? Is it like 100 times more than it caused? Okay, good. Yeah, why don't we focus on that?
There is also something to say about people are optimistic when their thoughts, actions, and beliefs are aligned, and often those people are building something for themselves because it came from their thoughts, right? If you're working for Morgan Stanley, it's unlikely you thought of the idea for Morgan Stanley. So you working for them is going to make you a little less optimistic because maybe you don't fully agree with all the policies that are in place for a company that you didn't choose to build from the ground up.
Yeah, there's probably like in some workplaces, there's like a sense of powerlessness or like treadmillness, or you're like, this just is what it is. And founders, I mean, high agency people in general, like, it doesn't have to be starting a company, but tend to be optimists, I think. And yeah, and optimists attract optimists. We were talking before we recorded about like Sky King is like optimistic as hell, dude. David Perell, incredibly optimistic dude. Like, these are people that consistently like give energy, and it's when you get in that kind of like echo chamber has a negative connotation, but like when you get an echo chamber of like optimism and positivity and energy, that's like great things come out of that. You get those little social dynamics where everybody like hypes each other up and helps and builds and shares a worldview that they're like loosely working towards together, but independently. That's the story, or the structure behind the story of so many great things in history.
Yeah. And what's interesting is it must be fascinating for you because you've lived in this book in the past, and now you're having to relive it by virtue of talking about it on podcasts and it coming out and tweeting about it. But it's like you compiled this maybe years ago at this point, and now you're forced to talk about it. But I'm also curious about like you being a yes, absolutely. I'm curious about you being a founder today in some sense. Not that you founded Scribe Media, but you get to found the way it will go about in the future. What's it like right now for you as stepping into a new role and taking the lessons from the Balaji book to build a company right now?
Yeah, it does. It feels a little bit like a refounding, I think, right? Like,
Well said.
It's a new corporation with an old brand and some of the experienced team, but it's a very like, we use the term Phoenix often, like internally, right? Like emerging from the ashes in a slightly new form. But it's been Scribe's had a wild year. And I, as of, I don't know, 2-3 months ago, stepped into the CEO role of this company that used to be I was a customer of, and they were the publisher of my books. And Tucker was I don't know what his role was there, but he certainly, like, when I had the Almanac and Naval manuscript, he really, like, went out of his way to help me publish that thing, like, personally.
Tucker Max,
yeah. I published through Scribe, but he got on the phone, guided the way, told me what was coming, like gave me some encouragement that I needed, told me I had some bad ideas in his Tucker way, and like just helped me navigate the maze of publishing. And that book, I mean, the process of writing it like changed me internally, but publishing that book and getting it out into the world like absolutely changed my life. And everything that's happened over the last 3 years is in small or large part because of that book. And ultimately like led to me becoming CEO of this company. And now I'm in a place where I get to reach that hand back and pay it forward and help other authors sort of go through that portal that I went through, which is super rewarding. Like I love to do that. And I don't know. I've never been a CEO before. I've worked at a startup for a long time, but I was never managed a huge team, never managed a P&L. And so when they, Seva and Xavier at Enduring Ventures like called and offered me the job, I was like, you guys know I've never like done this before, right? And they were like, yeah, we know. But like, we've got the context to like get you into a good spot. We'll kind of guide you through. We trust your instincts. I think this is a great place to like build the skills you don't have and capitalize on the ones you do. And you certainly have a passion for the company and the product and the industry. And I had this amazing experience. I've been evangelizing Scribe for years. I've been recommending it to friends. I was halfway through publishing my second book with them this year, and the anthology Balaji, which just came out. And I intend to continue using them. And now it's like, I don't know how deep you want me to go in this story, but like, I just wanted to save the company. Like that's how this whole thing started.
This is helpful from a broader perspective because people will find themselves in a situation that they didn't create, that they weren't a part of, but that they have to deal with the mess. The example that I think of, is like that losing a loved one or an unforeseen accident happens, right? Like you maybe didn't even create it. You're in a mess. And obviously it's a company, so it's way different than a human being and the loss of a life. But it's like the similar idea of like, how do you work through pain that you didn't ask for and that is in front of you? And have you uncovered anything that you think could be useful?
I think there's probably a lot of people who do this a lot more than I am and who are a lot better at it. They're probably better at dissociating. Like this one, I'm still so like, I still feel all the emotional ups and downs of it, and that like makes it more, it maybe makes it me better at the job in some ways and worse at it in others. It's a really interesting thing. The probably the bottom line, the most helpful thing is just that like, there's so many things in life that you don't control that you just have to, swim as best as you can in the tide that comes in. Do the work that's in front of you well, whatever that work may be. And I need, didn't control it, didn't cause it, but still chose to jump in and start swimming. Right. So there's no second thoughts really. Like I'm still really grateful for the opportunity to do as much good as I can. And like I said, I love the work of helping the authors and moving forward and building books in a format that is sacred to me, right? Like, and I think this company is so important. I felt that firsthand. Like this company helped me publish a book that I would have had no other way to publish that changed my life. And if I can, no matter what it takes to like keep that thing available to people who can follow that path and have a similar experience to me, like it does not take a lot of strength when you remember that that's the goal. And for whatever other like failings I have as a person, like I am not I do not give up. I am like persistent to a fault and have a high capacity for like just to keep marching, no matter how hard that march gets. And that makes up for a lot, I think, especially in situations like this, especially in other, all the situations you described, like death of a loved one, natural disasters, causes, like things that you couldn't possibly have controlled, avoided or prevented, like that befall you. You just wake up every day and get to work. And eventually like you'll be shocked how much progress you make.
Yeah, that's very well said. And you're very much an even keel type of guy. Like I would imagine you'd be great in a bunch of different circumstances, highs, lows, and you'd be able to maintain some level of peace amongst it. That's how you present, at least. What was the last situation that really got you off your rocker?
I don't know. I mean, off my rocker is like, as you said, I'm pretty even keeled. Like off my rocker, like, I don't know. I'm not like super easily ruffled in like a big way. I like I said, I do carry the burdens of people, like when they are angry, even if they're not really angry at me, like I am empathetically, like I feel that. I think like you can be even keeled and a calming presence and still kind of follow the internal state of the people around you and like be empathetic towards it and feel it with them. And so just being in a situation where people have extreme emotions, you are by nature going to be like a little less even keeled than if you would like just stayed home and not done anything. But and I do think it's an advantage in something like this, especially when, you're trying to like really go the distance and, not get burned out and not feel too pushed around and not feel exhausted by like super high highs and low lows of like every single day. To even those things out and just kind of like, I'm going to use the tide analogy again, like tide goes up, tide goes down, people are happy, people are sad, like, and you just keep swimming. That's kind of the mode, but it's not like I willed myself into that. I've just kind of always been that way. Like that is like what I was raised to do. That is like that has just been my mode forever.
It's the Midwestern nature in you.
It is. Yeah. Just keep pulling that plow.
So to give people a sense for how thoughtful of a person you are and why you probably make such a great CEO, when you sent me the anthology of Balaji, you highlighted specific sections, which I've never seen done before. I've been sent lots of books over the course of running this podcast, but never once has an author highlighted or made note of specific sections. And I saw you did that for Anthony Pompliano as well when he posted his copy on Twitter. I'm curious, did you highlight different sections for different people?
Of
what
course.
Went into of course.
Yeah.
and what, so the sections you highlighted for me were more technology, more progress, media driven by the reader's benefit, and starting small. Which of those three are most exciting for you? Because I have a quote from each that really hit me, and we can go down whatever rabbit hole you want.
I mean, we've already talked about the progress and technology bit a little bit. Like that's that chapter is the best summary of like the whole first section of the book, which is like why I tagged that one for you probably. The second two are like much more very specific to you, and I'm most curious actually for your thoughts about the media stuff. So like let's do media, and like I'm gonna interview you a little because I want to know your takes, because this is where I thought you would start to like. You'd really like get hyped and start like seeing some different ideas and like brainstorm some stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. The first quote that really hit me was, I think we are over-consuming novelty and under-consuming purpose. Like, really sit with that. I think we are over-consuming novelty and under-consuming purpose. Like, think about the feed, the never-ending now, the concept that David Perel talks about of think about how much of what you consumed in any given day was just created that day and what that means for the thoughtfulness of the content. I try to, with everything I do, think about my grandchildren and how would my grandchildren enjoy this podcast? What might they get out of it? That's why I asked the question about you dealing with a difficult situation that you don't control. Because I think, what would my grandchildren want to know from Eric in this situation? So I think this idea of over-consuming novelty and under-consuming purpose is so true and really did hit me at a deep level.
Yeah, it's awesome. It is. I think it's connected to the point he makes in there. That's like, once you realize that all your apps, everything you open, are basically algorithmic novelty. Like everything is like has no bearing on the thing before it. It's the what's the
slot
term?
Machine.
Yeah, the slot machine. I'm trying to remember the like psychological term for variable rewards. That's what it is. Like everything is different. It triggers every it like overhypes your neurochemistry. It's like you're reacting to novelty. You react positively to novelty, and it keeps you sort of like scrolling and swiping and staying and opening the different apps and like, ooh, new notification. Like it is, yeah, it's a digital slot machine that like keeps you engaged. But if you think about like how you actually learn deep things, and it comes from linear progress through a topic. Like it comes from reading a whole book, like start to finish, that's about a topic or a series of topics. It comes from watching a documentary. It comes from, doesn't come from these little short snaps. That's like that's like the Skittles, like brain Skittles compared to like chicken and broccoli, right? Over consuming novelty, under consuming purpose is like the great forward summary of that.
Yeah, and Balaji has so many of these that you've summarized, and also it brings to mind too, like under creating purpose, right? Like we're over consuming novelty and under creating purpose. Like you talk about consuming a documentary. What about creating one and how that changes you? Like creating this book changed you at a deep level because it was aligned with your purpose in some sense.
Yeah, I mean, and the supply and demand factor of like the more you create purpose, the more we demand purpose, the more purpose will get created.
Expand on that a little bit.
Well, like the more, so I mean, we see excellent long form content, right? Like long Joe Rogan interviews, 8-hour Balaji interviews. Like it's become a little bit of like a barbell. And where we have excellent educational, like progress, technology, like creating those values, people do sometimes seek it out, but the more people watch it, the more society will invest in it. The more we reward people who create incredible educational content, that makes us all better, like purpose content. I mean, that's what I admire about like what you're doing here, right? Like you are so thoughtful about these things and genuinely like go into it in ways that you're creating something to try to help the audience become better, try to help yourself become better, help the guests become better, right? Like there is purpose behind what you're doing and there's purpose behind why people are consuming it. It's so much more the shortcut, the like immediate gratification thing is to like go eat the Skittles and like you're trying to make chicken and broccoli delicious, which is so important and so valuable. And I think you succeed a lot. And the more people like opt for chicken and broccoli, the more people will make chicken and broccoli and the more like jacked, tan and brilliant we're all going to be. But that's like a feedback loop, right? So every time you like, you spend $1 or spend a minute of your time, you're voting for like the world that you want to see. And so don't just feel good about the fact that you're like here listening to this, but also feel good about the fact that you're here makes more like good purpose driven options available tomorrow and next month and next year.
Yeah. Because the person listening to this is going to create something either this year, next year, or beyond that is driven by thoughtfulness in some way. And I was curious what you feel like your purpose or your reason for being is.
I listened to you ask that to David Perel, and I had a feeling you were going to ask me that. And now I'm going to have a longer silent pause than he did.
Well, good luck trying to do that. 40 seconds at least. We could do it.
I think that was 45. The answer is I don't know what my purpose is.
I love you so much. Do you know how many people have commented to me about that silence? Like, I think every other day here in Austin, someone's like, that David Perel, that opening question, that silence. And now, hopefully, the Eric Jorgenson silence is in the same category.
Somehow I doubt it. I don't think ours raises the goosebumps quite as much as yours and David. It just comes in so hot. I loved it. That was genuinely a great episode. I truly did think about the question, and my best answer is that it changes, and that I think it's the older I get, the more dangerous I consider it to actually try to only have one purpose. I think that's such an alluring, like, simple, like, cool guy thing to say, of like, I've distilled my whole life to one purpose. And I don't actually believe that that's like a awesome, healthy way to go through life. I reflect on like my 25-year-old self, and I like deeply probably believed, I know it. I was like, my life's purpose is to build this home service marketplace startup. I'm all in on it. It's the only thing that matters. Like, yes, I go to the gym, but like, you laugh, but like, it's seriously like every past version of ourselves is like, you laugh and I laugh, but like, who is our present self compared to our past self? Like, how much wiser are we going to be in 10 years than we are today? Like, God's laugh at our plans, right? Like, to over serious, like, this moment, this version of you is like just such a slippery slope to like taking things so seriously, sacrificing things that shouldn't be sacrificed, like putting on blinders to opportunities or projects that may not benefit you, or that or getting so set in like how you want. Like, some of the hardest things psychologically, like the biggest challenges I've gone through, came in moments where like this incredible opportunity came up, but I had a plan. I had like a plan, and I had like a vision for how my next 3 months or 6 months or 1 year was going to go. And like, this amazing new thing showed up, but it fucked up my plan. And I'm like, I know there's a difference between like plan and core purpose in life, but it's actually a hazy line that I'm not sure. Like, I think it's great to have ideals, but like, and work towards them, and values and principles to live by. But I don't work that hard at like distilling it to one central thing. There's all kinds of new things entering my life and awareness, and new opportunities, and the context is changing constantly. And I try to react to that without overreacting to it, I guess. And I may be working on something very different in 20 years, and I want to be like totally okay with that.
Yeah. One thing that has come up for me recently is thinking about the problems of myself 5 years ago the problems of myself 10, the problems of myself last year, and how different they are, and what that means exactly for the problems that I have right now. It's like, if they were meaningless a year ago, in this moment, what are the problems that I think I have right now, and how are they meaningless? And how can I just be and hear and see what is actually going on in front of me, instead of manufacturing some problems or some purpose, right? Because purpose comes along with problems. But what's fascinating is that I feel like purpose comes from the thing that you lacked as a child. And I'm curious what you feel like you lacked as a child.
Probably, I mean, I was an only child, and so I didn't have like any close siblings, like friends on the street. But I think like close camaraderie is probably like the thing that comes to mind most clearly, which I think is what drew me to startups as an early career thing, is because like that is a workplace that is just so, it's what drew me to intense team sports, like rowing, and it's what drew me to startups, because the context creates these really intense, deep relationships. And I knew that I wanted that. And I think that is choosing your context to choose your outcome. Like, I don't know how consciously I did it. But like, I felt at home in those places that were just intense pressure cookers of like, you can't have a social life because it kind of like comes with your work or comes with your sport. And it is like social life bundled with mission, and you're all like in it together, and you're all like pushing each other to be better at it and being extreme at it. I don't know. That's the pattern so far. I may have grown out of that. I don't know. I don't know for sure. Like, we'll see. But that is my best diagnosis of my younger self from my present self's perspective.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is, that kind of insinuates that growing out of it is a positive thing, and that, but like, what if that's just like, you're always going to be building yourself up around camaraderie and chasing missions with people that you're excited to do things with because you didn't get that as a child. I think that's an amazing thing. I don't think there's inherently anything wrong.
No, I think lucky to have come out of childhood with a pretty constructive like version of that, right? Like, I was like very lucky in a lot of ways. So yeah, I think it could do much worse than like a yearning for camaraderie and building together and achieving something along with people you trust and admire, who like are push you and you push them.
Yeah, it's like exactly what you're doing with Scribe. The other section that you highlighted for me in the Balaji book is starting small. And I found this fascinating, that oil, steel, and pharmaceutical companies started in garages. And you're like, when I read that, I was like, wait, really? Like, that's insane. And the quote here is, when you think about oil, steel, and pharmaceuticals, you do not think, I'm going to go out and start that in a garage. But that's what people did. And that makes me quite excited about the things that are getting started in garages today and where those industries could be headed.
Absolutely. That's exactly like another thing that changed. Like, now I look for those companies, and I know, don't shy away from people doing crazy stuff in garages, because that's where so many great things started. And the stuff that's happening in garages right now would blow your mind. Like, there's crazy like battery chemistry startups getting built, and mind controlled, non-invasive robotic prosthetic arms, and aerial construction drones. And there's a guy, Kai Micah Mills, who's like, doing cryopreservation of pets in his garage. Like, please do not tell his landlord. Cool stuff of these high agency people who, back to the optimists, who are like, I see a way to improve the world, and I'm not going to wait to get started. I'm going to like just start rolling this snowball right here.
It's so cool. I mean, have you always been interested in technology to the level you are?
No, this is a slowly accumulating thing for me. I grew up in like a small business family, so I've always been interested in entrepreneurship. That was kind of like what came first. And then when I was in college, it was the sort of emergence of the like young Silicon Valley. It was like when Zuckerberg was getting big and Jack Dorsey was just building Twitter. And so tech seemed accessible to ambitious young people and like a quick way to kind of get involved and start doing something right away. And so that's what initially attracted me. And I lived in San Francisco for a long time and met awesome people and got immersed in like that scene and immersed in that scene and got to hang out with people building really cool stuff that were really inspiring and saw some of these like trajectories of something go from a garage to a big product to making a huge impact on the world. And like Airbnb, this is the era of Airbnb and Uber and Lyft and a lot of these things that like affected the real world in, you know, the physical realm and things that changed our everyday lives. And it's the past few years of, like, I think I mentioned, Where's My Flying Car, and working on this book, The Anthology of Balaji, and reading, just reading a lot more and consuming a lot more about like the truly hard tech, the history of venture capital. The Power Law is a great book by Sebastian Mallaby. Seeing how those new ideas like get fed, watered, and grow and become new, amazing things that change, you know, slowly become things that we take for granted. Like those are amazing stories, and remembering that those opportunities are available to us to contribute to today. That's really what has like gotten me more and more, not just into technology, but increased the bar for what I consider technology. Like a lot of people, like the tech industry, like this is a really helpful Balaji distinction actually, is like we think of like the tech industry. What the hell does that mean? Like every industry has technology. We tend to think of it as like software now, but software is like one small subset of technology, and most of it is pretty mature at this point. Like it's no longer really a frontier technology. And I hope, you know, more and more venture capital and more attention and more talented like young people and engineers move towards these like hard tech frontiers that are accessing these much bigger markets, actually, things like energy and transportation and carbon capture. And there's so much cool stuff to be done. Nanotechnology in particular is one that like nanotechnology has not yet has its like SpaceX moment. Like there is a big like genre defining company to be built there for sure. That will hopefully happen in our lifetimes and could happen in 10 years or could happen in 30 years. It's just kind of a question of like who breaks through and how and when. Material science, like the whole hullabaloo around the room temperature superconductor was like this amazing reminder that like, oh yeah, this is like, we have a ton of like potential achievements to unlock all around us all the time. It just takes, you know, the right person in the right lab or the right garage to find something new that totally like sets off this huge set of dominoes to new infrastructure and new capabilities.
Why do you think we take for granted the technology that has come before us so easily?
Oh, it's human nature. Like we take everything for granted.
I mean, even the ability to change things. It's remarkable how when we do make changes, we remind ourselves of the ease and the possibility of it, even in our own personal lives. Like I started running recently, and that is now like, oh, I can add to the scope of skills that I have. But I never like considered myself a runner or considered running a marathon like just something that I could do.
Yeah.
What is that?
It's probably like the most efficient use of neurons or something, of like your brain is actively trying to like forget things all the time. Like it's hard to remember things. It's hard to remember or prioritize like what needs to be remembered. And we're good at remembering like, you know, threats or opportunities, really. Like when we're really, really happy or really, really scared, like we tend to remember and form those, or things are just bizarre. But the more normal things become, like the less we pay attention to it and the less we remember it. And it takes some historical context to appreciate how good things are right now and where we came from. And in our lifetimes in particular, most of the advancements that we've seen have been inside a screen. You know, like we went from iPhone 1 to iPhone 15, and that is incredible, but it's not physically, tangibly obvious how incredible that is. Not nearly as much as like, imagine living through the first human flight or going from horses to cars or railroads or oil or electrification. Like, can you imagine seeing a light bulb for the first time and then living through like the electrification of America, or watching us go to the moon for the first time? Like, those are, it seemingly breaks, it would break what you thought were the laws of physics. Like, we haven't lived through any of those like changes in the physical material world that totally disrupted all of our priors and reminded us that like miracles are possible.
Wow.
Room temperature superconductors would have been one of them, even though it's a little abstract, but there's a ton of potentials that could happen kind of at any given moment. And the closer you get to like reading, reading any of the journals or reading some of the crazy like science that's happening, like, and Balaji talks about some of these in the book, like we are programming the genetics of mice to like not die or become super jacked or like live longer, or like there's all kinds of things that are really close potential breakthroughs that just either aren't being nurtured or like extrapolated and expanded and distributed yet, or are still being studied or whatever. But there's so many out there. There's another cause for optimism.
Yeah. And well, it's so interesting how the thing that you repeat to yourself and have heard so often becomes uncomfortable, even if it's positive, in the case of the electric cars. But I know, like for me, when I read the sentence, to tell the world it's possible to cure the deaf, restore sight, and end death itself made me shudder. And you would imagine that would be a positive thing that would help people in a lot of sense. But I've become so conditioned to believe that death is an inevitability. And to hear someone like actually say that it is possible to end death, to me felt uncomfortable. So interesting to note.
Yeah.
What does that bring up for you?
I mean, as we noted, like Balaji does not mind making you uncomfortable. I think it's an incredible aspiration for technology. Me personally, I'm all in on health span improvement. I'm a little more dubious of the longevity stuff, but it's just because it's harder to, or the like immortality stuff, I should say, because it's a little more difficult to conceptualize. Is like, immortal in what form? Like, I don't want to like slowly go crazy and then have my body be like unable to die, right? Like, that seems terrible. I don't want to be like an enormous burden on the civilization because like I can't die, but I also can't contribute. Like, there's all kinds of forms of that. I think the summary is like, I think we should learn to change our minds before we learn how to live forever. But if, as Balaji talks about, like getting, like, it's not just that we're going to like age forever into nothing. It is that we're genetically programmed to sort of like wind down our bodies in the same way that we're genetically programmed to like grow up and go through puberty. And if we can stop that pre-programmed thing from happening, then it's possible that we can have longer lifespans or much healthier lifespans, and it's not indefinite, but it's like, I don't know, maybe it's 200 years. Like, how smart would we be after 200 years? Or would it work like it is today, where once you hit 50, you pretty much stop changing your mind about anything? Like, that would not be constructive for society. So I think there's so many unknowns, but I think it's like a universally, there's a sentence in there that I'll try to nail because I think it's such a good one. It's a fundamental tenet of the technologist to believe that the next problem is solvable. Like, you always, like, it is so easy to sit there and say like, well, but if we invent X, then like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and it's like, yeah, but also like we invented airplanes and then we invented like parachutes and landing strips and fuselages and pressurized and air traffic controllers and like runway lights. Like, the next problem is solvable, like always, 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 always. So we should never not invent something or not study something or not pursue something because we see like some potential negative instance or impact in the future. We are much more predisposed to pessimism, especially around change, than optimism. I think, back to like the human default, like what our hardware is wired to do is like assess threats. And so it is so much easier to see a change and react with oh, no, we can't do that and rationalize our way into not doing it. One, because it's easier to not do something than do it. But two, because that's the way our brain's wired to work. And so, it's your question of like, how do you become an optimist? Like working hard to to build that habit of seeing the good outcomes, not just the bad, looking past the bad, seeing that you can solve that next problem.
On that point, I mean, one of the most interesting parts to me was about writing out your goals. That's a part that I didn't expect Balaji to talk about. And it's the process of writing out your goals that can help you see a future that is brighter, because who's writing out goals that's going to harm them in some way? To quote Balaji, it's write out your goals. It's amazing how few people do. By writing out your goals, you prevent a random walk through life. So many people just wander throughout their life. It's beautiful. And it's true.
Yeah. I think it's a really, it's one of those things that's so simple that it seems like it can't possibly have a huge impact, but it can. And what's the downside? Give it a shot. Why not? Can I ask you about media stuff?
Absolutely.
Okay. So one of the things I really hoped would excite you in that media chapter that I highlighted is alignment between like creator and audience, or writer and reader. And I think the example that he uses that I'm sure you'll have an exciting twist on is like, we have now the technology to create a feedback loop between, media that creates progress for the reader. Like fitness is the most obvious example. So he's like, what does the next era of like Men's Health magazine look like? Does it look like every subscriber has like a Whoop and a smart scale, and the publication scores itself on the actual like fitness impacts that it creates for its readers? Like it's a community, not just, selling media, but selling outcomes. And I think that that's a really amazing, like healthy shift. Like what is the media that you're creating? What is the transformation that you seek to create for the people who are listening? And how can you measure and optimize for that impact? Does that excite you? What metrics would you shoot for? Like, how do you see those things like interacting in the future?
Yeah. I mean, it would be really cool if I could have a dashboard of like a personalized DM about a specific episode, a random outreach, and per episode, how much inbound I get per specific episode. That would be so cool. And that would be like, I don't know, I would check that dashboard every day, right? That would just be so exciting. And to quote the book, it's like, increase your truth, health, and wealth. Imagine a personal dashboard that shows your daily knowledge, your physical fitness, and your bank balance. And it's like, it's really so true. I do this today in Google Sheets, where I track each one of my bank balances and credit cards in a Google Sheet with the date. I got that from Alex Ramosi, and it's just like a great way to check the functioning of my system, my wealth system. And then with physical fitness, I do the same thing with, I have a Google Sheet for my running and like how many miles I'm running a week. And so it's I don't know how to do it exactly for the daily knowledge, but maybe pages read could apply here, but pages read isn't necessarily equivalent. But how do you set up your daily knowledge, your physical fitness, and your bank balance, if at all, or how would you create a personal dashboard like that?
Yeah, I mean, mine is like, I don't actually like to look at the money every day because I don't want to optimize my whole life around like earning as much money as possible. Like that's not I think that's
me neither.
Not the right thing to focus on. Probably Whoop is the closest thing that like I check my Whoop like recovery score every day. And like I try to live my life as such a way that like I know I feel better and I get more done and I'm happier and in a better mood. And so are the people around me when my Whoop is green. And so I try to like go to bed early, not eat late, not drink very much. Like great, right? Like that has been such a helpful feedback loop. Yeah. And the work has, I have no problem like checking in on work all the time. Like that's, but I don't use money as a like measure for that at all. Do you know, like as a creator, like, do you have a North Star on if you were going to choose like, maybe a metric is too specific, but like a type of outcome that you want to create for your audience?
Let's see if I can do 45 seconds here. No, I would say that what I'm trying to create is to show optimism, show light, show the good in humanity and surround myself with that. But how do you measure that, right? Like, how do you measure love? Like, you could try to measure love with your wife, but that's a very difficult proposition to do. And I'm really trying to optimize for love for my guest in the moment by listening and hearing them and asking questions that I think are interesting to them and could be insightful to them. But also love for the audience of like, by giving love to someone else and seeing it, people can then help themselves in their day to day in terms of listening and in terms of helping. So like, how do you measure how well you listen to someone or how much someone got out of it by virtue of listening? How much love did they receive? You have any ideas on that, Eric?
I had one for your first, like measuring the love received by like good listening. Very, very difficult. Measuring like you could run like natural language processing software over the tweets or email, like any public output of, whether it's your YouTube comments or all the tweets of the people that are like following you, like that might give you an index. That's just way too noisy. I do think there's a company that we invested in actually that's like they're like Whoop for like brain activity. And so there's like a little hardware thing that is like, gives you a sense of like how recovered is your brain, how balanced are things. Like it's fascinating. And it's such a cool thought experiment of like, who is just like purely objectively neurochemically the happiest person on earth?
Yes.
Like I'm so fascinated by that question. Like it's probably not, It's almost certainly like no world leader, no Hollywood actor, like nobody that people like admire or follow or respect. It's probably like a plumber in like Minnesota who just like makes okay money, but spends half his time just like helping people solve problems that they're like really worried about. And he goes to church and has a great family and like volunteers in the week. It's probably somebody like that who is like objectively, if we could measure everyone's brain, the happiest person on earth. I love that thought experiment. I think that's so fascinating. And it'd be an interesting sci-fi premise, I think, to like score your subjective neurochemical experience and like give people the chance to actually optimize that. To be fair, like Whoop, like if your physical body and your mental health are like so incredibly like intertwined, then like maybe physical metrics are the best version of it. But there's also plenty of people who are like jacked and deeply unhappy. So that's probably not a tight enough correlation to actually take to the bank.
Yeah. And I think that idea just fires me up so much. And I'm just like so excited by that possibility. And it's interesting because one of my questions for you was, do you think Balaji is happy after living so much in his shoes?
I think Naval's probably happier.
Yeah.
I don't think Balaji is concerned with happiness or optimizing for happiness. Like, I don't think he's like unhappy. And I think especially like the stuff he's doing now with the network state, I think is like we're just recording this right after the network state conference. It's like 1,000 people came from all over the world to like get together in Amsterdam and kind of share ideas and figure out how to kind of move some of this network state stuff forward. And I bet it's really rewarding to see years and years of like sharing your ideas and cultivating relationships and putting good things out in the world and trying to help people like manifest in a physical space with like 1,500 people like all coming together to like talk about the idea that you kind of like brought into the world. And I mean, that's probably a really, really cool thing. Yeah.
When are you going to do something like that?
Someday.
Because I think there's a lot of people who would love to go to a conference or just like a meetup that Eric Jorgenson puts on. I would go for sure.
I appreciate that. That's very nice of you. I think it would be really, really fun. And I do love bringing people together and introducing people to each other. And there's so many times in life when like, it's so cool to just like put people at a table together and just like see the magic happen. Yeah, I love that.
One of my favorite underrated feelings in the world that I don't think have a word for is my world expanding. And your world expanding means like you're introduced to new people or you get new information or new knowledge. Whenever my world's expanding, I feel such joy. And I think you also have that same feeling. And I think a lot of people attracted to this podcast also are trying to explore more of the world and expand their own world. And why does that feel so good?
I don't know. I'm sure there's some sense of like safety in it where you're like, oh God, there's like more people like who get me than I thought there were, or I get this person and like we get to kind of like be together. There's also like, I mean, that's the human version of it. There's also just the joy of finding things out, of learning, like that, to steal a phrase from Richard Feynman. Like it feels so good to feel like you click in, like it's this new experience that like deepens or widens like who you are or how much of the world that you understand. And that's actually like, I feel like, an idea that you would really love and resonate with. The more people you love, the more of the world you understand.
I think about that all the time.
Like if you love someone,
how can you just look at a stranger and just feel love for that person? Right? I think it's remarkable to me that we're all human beings floating around on this rock in space. We don't know how we got here. And you have the opportunity in this moment to just love someone, love the person in front of you. And it's like, how do you not get in your own way? The reason why we don't do that is because we're in our own way. We're in our thoughts, we're in our patterns, we're in, what is this person going to think of me? I don't want to introduce myself. I don't want to say this kind thing randomly. But get out of your own way, remove the ego from yourself, and you just want to help people. You just want to love people. You just want to be there with someone. And it resonates with me so deeply. What is that? Whose quote is that?
I think it's mine. I think I tweeted that a while ago. But I was thinking about it in terms of all these people who can't, who like vilify the other because they've never been close enough to any of them to understand that like there is like a good heart at the center of something that like they find the surface of so confusing and so different. And the wider the variety of people that you can create a deep enough relationship with to like feel like you do truly love them, then you understand whole countries, whole cultures, like huge swaths of the world. Even people, you can understand people who hate each other, and like see good in all of them. If you like get to the bottom of that, it's a hard state to maintain, I think, but it is back to our idea of like, who are the happiest people? Like, I think if you could see, like, if you could feel the reward, the feedback loop of that, of living that way, and like the benefit to your own mental state and the person, like the people around you, I think there's people that kind of glow with that. And I suspect that is like somewhere near the root of their worldview. I haven't embodied that yet. Like, I think it's a long quest. But I'm lucky to know some people that I think are really like have that gift or have done the work to earn that skill. And it's an incredible thing to be in the presence of.
What are the common patterns among the people you know like that?
They are generous. They're patient. They're understanding. They default to a kind of acceptance of people, usually by having accepted themselves. I think that's like probably a part of the journey. But I don't know. Like that's, like I said, I'm not, I don't feel like I've seen the end of that road. So I'm speculating.
And when you have felt like the most embodied in that state, what was going on within you?
was like very freshly recently inspired by somebody who was really good at it. And Naval did us all, I think, a huge favor by reminding us that like happiness is a skill. And that extends to almost every piece of your internal state and internal monologue. Like, it is a skill to cultivate, that first instinct towards acceptance or towards love or towards appreciation or towards gratitude. And it's a hard thing to do. It's a long road to like build that to a point where it's ever present. And I don't know if anybody's perfect at it, but, it is that it's within reach, that it's simple, but not easy, and a long road. And, probably like the meditation practice of like, it doesn't ever get easier. But you definitely make progress.
And on that note, if someone is listening to this and feels like they haven't got to that point ever in their life, just remember this quote from Balaji, which says, "Every year I feel like my life starts anew. I'm in my 40s now, but I feel like I've just started because I've built up various resources like distribution, network, and capital. The past has been a prologue. Now I've got a canvas to play with." The past has been a prologue. Now I've got a canvas to play with. I think if you live with that ethos, you realize that every moment is a new moment to recreate yourself. And it's a remarkable way to help bring this podcast to a landing close, which is like, at the end is just the beginning.
Yeah, I like that. That is how I want people to feel reading the book too. I want that book to be the starting pistol to you building something, changing something, bringing a new worldview to whatever the projects are that you already have at hand. I hope it's inspiring. And I hope the ripple effects of this thing like are felt all over the world in 10 years, 20 years. And it's like the match that struck and lit the fuse of building a lot of really cool stuff.
What's a challenge you can leave people with after listening to us for an hour and a half? What should somebody do as a result of this conversation?
Find something that you're taking for granted and build a habit to appreciate it every day.
Retweet. Eric Jorgenson, I have so much love for you. The anthology of Balaji available wherever you buy your books. Link down below. Anywhere else we should send people to connect with you further?
All my links are at ejorgenson.com, and I'm on Twitter like way too often. Come say hi.
And he's an incredible tweeter, incredible mind, a high signal human being who did not disappoint in the slightest, talking about some incredible ideas. Thank you so much for being here.